If we look at the recent movie Smoke, where the thief is a black kid. Now, in the original script, it's based on a story by Paul Auster. In the story, there's no racial identification of the character. So when I talked to Wayne Wang, who directed the film, I said, why did you choose to make the thief black? And he putters and stutters around, but he can't say. He will not say, because the only thing he can say is, this will give this movie more zip to make the thief black. It will make it more compelling to people. It'll give a kind of good guy, bad guy quality to it. And it will just make it all the more stimulating, because he would have to admit that the fact that he simultaneously, in making that choice, is also reproducing certain kinds of racial stereotypes. Nobody wants to lay claim to consciously constructing these images that perpetuate white supremacy, racism, etc.
Give me your word, motherfucker! You disrespected me! You dissed me, motherfucker!
And the ironic thing is that I can sit in classrooms in universities where my students don't want to accept that someone consciously creates that representation.
Where are those transmissions you intercepted? What have you done with those plans?
How come people didn't think about Darth Vader and the whole sort of sense of who decides what voice will constitute the villainous voice?
If this is a consularship, where is the ambassador?
I mean, what does it mean that media has such control of our imaginations that they don't want to accept that there are conscious manipulations taking place, and that in fact we want to reserve, particularly for the arena of movie making, a certain sense of magic, a certain sense that reality is being documented, and again, I think that part of the power of cultural criticism and cultural studies has been its sort of political intervention as a force in American society to say there really is a conscious manipulation of representations, and it's not about magical thinking, it's not about like pure imagination, creativity, it's about people consciously knowing what kinds of images will produce a certain kind of impact.
I will love you my whole life. You and no other.
One of the issues that no one wants to talk about is that finally the most successful political movement in the United States of the last 20 years was really feminist movement, and that there is a tremendous backlash to feminism that is being enacted on the stage of mass media, so that films like Leaving Las Vegas really are about ushering in a new old version of the desirable woman that really is profoundly misogynist-based and sexist. It's no accident. We know that when women went into the factories in the world wars because men were not here, that when those wars ended, mass media was used to get women out of the factory and back into the home. Well, in a sense, mass media is being used in that very same way right now to get women out of feminism and back into some patriarchal mode of thinking. And movies, to me, are the lead propaganda machine in this right now.
So for $500, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can fuck my ass.
Oh my God.
You can come on my face.
Oh.
I began to use the phrase in my work, white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, because I wanted to have some language that would actually remind us continually of the interlocking systems of domination that define our reality, and not to just have one thing be like, gender is the important issue, race is the important issue. But for me, the use of that particular jargonistic phrase was a sort of shortcut way of saying all of these things actually are functioning simultaneously at all times in our lives. And that if I really want to understand what's happening to me right now at this moment in my life as a black female of a certain age group, I won't be able to understand it if I'm only looking through the lens of race. I won't be able to understand it if I'm only looking through the lens of gender. I won't be able to understand it if I'm only looking at how white people see me. I mean, one of the to me, an important breakthrough I felt in my work and that of others was the call to use the term white supremacy over racism, because racism in and of itself did not really allow for a discourse of colonization and decolonization, the recognition of the internalized racism within people of color. And it was always, in a sense, keeping things at the level at which whiteness and white people remained at the center of the discussion. In my classroom, I might say to students, that when we use the term white supremacy, it doesn't just evoke white people. It evokes a political world that we can all frame ourselves in relationship to. And I think that I was able to do that because I grew up, again, in racial apartheid, where there was a color caste system. So that obviously I knew that through my own experiential reality, that it wasn't just what white people do to black people that was wounding and damaging to our lives. I knew that when we went over to my grandmother's house, who looked white, who lived in a white neighborhood, and she called my sister Blackie because she was dark and her hair was nappy, and my sister would sit in a corner and cry or not want to go over there, I knew that there is some system here that is hurting this little girl, that is not directly the direct hit from the white person. And white supremacy was that term that allowed one to acknowledge our collusion with the forces of racism and imperialism. And so for me, those words were very much about the constant reminder, one, of institutional constructs, that we're not talking about personal constructs in the sense of how do you feel about me as a woman or how do you feel about me as a black person, but they really seem to me to evoke a larger apparatus. And I don't know why those terms have become so mocked by people, because in fact, far from simplifying the issues, I think they actually, when you merge them together, really complicate the questions of freedom and justice globally, because it means then that we have to look at what black people are doing to each other in Rwanda. We have to, and we can't just say racism, what have you. We have to problematize nationalism beyond race in all kinds of ways that I think there's a tremendous reluctance, particularly in the United States, to have a more complex accounting of identity